He was inspired by a committed teacher in the PD. Now he's inspiring many statewide. Find out who he is and let him inspire you this morning on Carolina People. Good morning. Welcome to Carolina People. This morning we're on 4th Avenue in Conway at the Coastal Outreach Service Center for the South Carolina School for the Deaf and Blind. We're focused on access technology, and we're visiting with the statewide coordinator, Marty McKenzie. Good morning, Marty.
Good morning.
Thanks so much for being with us this morning.
Glad to be here.
This is very exciting to get in and to think about all the activities going on with the South Carolina School for the Deaf and Blind now. And of course, access technology is so big, but it was even more exciting to see that recently you've been picking up quite a bit with as a vision consultant for the South Carolina Department of Education.
Yes, that's correct.
Real quick about yourself, Marty. Are you originally from the area?
I'm originally from the PD area. I live in Lake City, South Carolina. Grew up there, was educated in the Williamsburg County school system, and attended a local college for my undergraduate degree, Francis Marion College. I am often proud of the fact that I am the last graduating class of Francis Marion College before it went to university status.
Is that right? Do you mind me asking what year that was?
1992.
1992. Son of a gun. So you've remained in the Palmetto State your whole life?
I have.
Do you still have family in the area?
My mother actually lives with me. I have 3 brothers, and as I often like to say, a passel of nieces and nephews. They come and they go.
I bet they do. They love to see
adorable.
Uncle Marty.
Mm-hmm.
And of course, being the third of 4 boys, having no girls in the house, that must have been interesting growing up.
You learned to survive very quickly.
Oh, yeah.
There are 2 older brothers. There's quite an age difference between us. The oldest one is in mid-40s and the youngest one is early 30s. And so there's 8 years between me and the next brother above me.
Mm-hmm.
My parents often said they had 2 families.
Oh, yeah. I'm sure they felt that way oftentimes. And, of course, now they probably feel like they have, as you said, 5 or 6 families with all the nieces and nephews.
Exactly. Exactly.
In this position as a statewide vision consultant, you're traveling all over the state now.
Yes, I'm covering the entire state with that responsibility and that role, providing assistance to school districts and to teachers. It's been an exciting role. It's been a collaboration between the South Carolina Department of Education and the South Carolina School for the Deaf and the Blind Outreach Services. And it is something that I have enjoyed thoroughly.
Mm-hmm. Of course, you're working with blind students. When you think about that statewide, how does that happen, Marty? I guess, is there a typical situation? It's probably atypical because every instance is different. But if you could try to get folks a sense of what it's like.
Well, of course, it is atypical because there are no 2 situations that are the same. We go into the school districts and provide what those students need to the best of our ability. And when we make recommendations for school districts, we recommend what a child really and truthfully needs.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. And of course, those aspects, having not visited the South Carolina School, the main campus up in Spartanburg, did you spend time? Now, you said you grew up in the Williamsburg County schools?
Correct. Yes.
Have you spent much time on the main campus there in Spartanburg?
I have not spent time there as a student. I have spent quite a bit of time there as a South Carolina School for the Deaf and the Blind employee.
Mm-hmm.
In my first years, I spent as much as a week, a month on the campus, just providing technology services and support to the teachers in the School for the Blind and to the information technology staff as they worked diligently to implement all of the technology that the students would need to be successful.
Mm-hmm. Let's talk a little bit about Braille, Marty. Is Braille commonly used to teach blind children?
It is. Braille is the literacy media of choice for blind children whenever it is appropriate and their ability permits them to learn to read that code. It is as important to a blind person as the printed words are on the paper in front of you, and in order for a child to be successful, they need to have the same access to Braille that you have to your printed words.
Share with the viewers if you could just break down Braille. Is there some way to break it down? You mentioned a code.
We often refer to it as a code. We have jokingly referred to it as a second language, which of course is not true. Louis Braille in the early 1800s developed the code to be used to transmit messages among folks in the French army. Of course, Braille has undergone many changes since then, but it is basically a set of 6 dots, 1, 2, 3 on the left side, 1, 2, 3 on the right side.
Mm-hmm.
They are aligned, and combinations of those dots form the Braille words and the contractions. Braille contains in the neighborhood of 277 contractions. So we have a situation where in print the word but is spelled B-U-T. In Braille, the letter B in isolation is the word but.
Is that right?
So it's almost a shorthand or short form way of reading. The reason they do that is because the standard Braille page contains 25 lines of Braille, and each line can contain 40 characters of Braille. Of course, with your printed page, you can have 60 lines of print and any number of characters with today's soft fonts.
Mm-hmm.
The reason that we have to do this contracted method is because it just takes lots of space. It's a very heavy paper, about 110-pound paper, and so 1,000-page literature book for a high school student can be 40 volumes in Braille. You got to store that. You got to have the access for the student. It is very large in its presentation.
Now, of course, when you think about how does one go about, do you have to learn something prior to learning Braille? Is it, you spoke about it, as you say, oftentimes jokingly referred to as a second language, but is there something that has to be learned prior to learning Braille, or?
Just your normal reading readiness skills that any student would get. We love to have students learn to track with their fingers, and there are tools available from American Printing House for the Blind and other vendors throughout the nation that give us those opportunities or those materials that we need to prepare students to read Braille. We want them to be able to tactually discriminate various types of what you would call textures.
Mm-hmm.
And we do not want students to be tactually defensive. We do have some students who are blind who are tactually defensive. They don't like to be touched, and they don't like to touch. That is usually something that can be corrected with instruction.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. And when you talk about instruction, is it normally, do you mind me? I mean, I'm just wondering, who are the best instructors, or not the best, but who are most commonly recognized as instructors of Braille?
Well, certainly the only instructors of Braille in South Carolina are teachers of the visually impaired.
Mm-hmm.
And those people are highly trained professionals.
Mm-hmm.
They are also very, very difficult to find. The training required for those teachers is very, very intense.
Mm-hmm.
Often people shy away from that profession because it is a little known profession. One school district may have one teacher, other school districts may have no teachers, large school districts may have 2 or 3 teachers of the visually impaired. Currently in South Carolina, there are approximately 82 certified teachers of the visually impaired. Not all of those teachers are providing instruction. Some are in administrative positions and other areas that still serve those blind students, but they're not in the classrooms providing the instruction.
Mm-hmm.
At any given time in South Carolina, there are 5 openings for a teacher of the visually impaired. Now, you may have to move somewhere you don't want to live, but there's always a job available in that field.
And for that person who does move, they may be serving a lot of different homes or a lot of different school systems. I mean,
absolutely.
When we think about that, of course, we'll talk a little more during the week with some other folks related to the school that can share about components of early intervention and teaching in multiple homes, for instance, as well as helping. For yourself, Marty, when you think about visual impairment or blindness, there are there's some wide swings there oftentimes in the levels of visual impairment. Do you mind me asking, do your brothers or any other family members have serious visual impairment?
There are no other members of my family that have significant visual impairment. They all wear glasses, except one. Apparently, that is just something we inherited. I am an accident. They don't know what happened to me. I had a birth defect, is how it's always been labeled, and having what we commonly call the old people's disease, macular degeneration. Having that onset at birth is rather unusual. Certainly not unheard of, but unusual.
So it was virtually at the get-go. I mean, this was
absolutely, absolutely.
And of course now, so the experiences for you that having grown up, and obviously you must be proficient in Braille as well at this point.
Yes.
It's the ability possibly to be able to help in some training with the needs statewide. Who goes about helping to make sure, in some of the certifications for Braille statewide must be pretty, as you said, intense.
It is, and the program is managed now at the University of South Carolina upstate. Dr. David Alford is the professor, but there are other adjunct instructors such as myself, Lee Spear at the South Carolina School for the Deaf and the Blind. Clay Jeffcoat is also considered an adjunct instructor. And we provide instruction to students, usually in summer classes, when things are really, really intense and the instructor there just can't teach everything at once. Dr. Alford can only teach so many classes per session.
Sure.
So they call upon us to provide that instruction, and we love doing that because we have our hands on the teachers. We learn what their strengths and weaknesses are. We're able to address their weaknesses and help them learn to maximize their strengths. And I just feel really, really good about the teachers that have come through the program over the last few years.
That's wonderful. That's wonderful, Marty. Let's talk a little about blind students' access to computers. Is that similar to sighted students, for instance?
It is very similar at this point. That has not always been the case. The access technology arena has been emerging for the past 15 years or so. Over the past 15 years, the technology has become more affordable. It is still very expensive, but it is more affordable than once was the case. School districts are making a very, very good effort in most cases to provide equal access for students who are blind or visually impaired to the technology in their district, so that those students are competing on a level playing field with the sighted peers. I have often referred to access technology as the great equalizer because it opened doors that heretofore had been closed to blind people. New job opportunities, new career opportunities, new learning opportunities. It just wasn't there. But as with anything that is new, it is emerging very rapidly, and we're still dealing with some of the ramifications of how to implement that in the districts and make sure that we leave Braille as the primary reading media. I've had people say to me, "Oh, we have computers now, we don't need Braille anymore." That is absolutely not true. Braille and that Braille paper and those dots are to a blind person what your paper and your print are to you. And the computer, just for us, is another way of getting additional information, accessing all of the stuff that's available on the internet, performing daily tasks, and you use the computer for the same thing. Our computers would look identical. Mine would have a speech program on it that would read whatever is on the screen to me. Yours would not have that.
Marty, you are so well-spoken. It is amazing. You're probably as well-spoken as any guest as I've had in the last 3 years. And your own background and training, what was that like for you, of course, growing up, and what are some of the changes that have happened in the profession before you became obviously a statewide consultant and now travel, as you said, all over the state? What was it like for you growing up in the Williamsburg County school system?
I think it was probably the best situation I could have had at the time. Had I been born 1 year earlier, I would have been enrolled in the South Carolina School for the Deaf and the Blind in the residential program. My father was not willing for that to happen. He wanted a program there. And he told my mother, if he moves to Spartanburg, we all move. I will not put my 5-year-old child on a bus and send him to Spartanburg from Sunday to Friday. Parents make decisions based on what they believe is best for their children and what they believe they can handle. Fortunately, there were new pilot programs for students with visual impairments occurring in the school districts that year. 1973 is when I entered school. And Williamsburg County had one. I think Greenville was the other one. Williamsburg County had a teacher, Ms. Marge Holliday, that was absolutely phenomenal. My parents didn't know what to do. No one had ever had a blind child, and they were good parents, but what do you do? How do you embark on something that you know nothing about? And she came out and she said, it's going to be fine. He's going to learn differently. He will go through school just fine. And I did. She spent the 13 years, including kindergarten, in school with me, and she retired the year that I graduated in 1986. She is still in Kingstree and still very, very active and able to do the things that she wants to do. Was able to attend our Vision Summit in '04. It surprised me and left me in tears. But I often look at myself and I know that I am a product of what she was able to do and the skills that she had because she is a teacher of the visually impaired. That was a real interesting experience for me growing up. The thing that happened to me was I was about the only blind kid around. Nobody else in the school really had a visual deficiency that reached the level that mine is. And so my friends were all sighted, and so I did everything they did. If they went out on Saturday night, I went out on Saturday night. I looped Lake City just like everybody else did. And the thing that was so fascinating about it is they just never thought of me as being that different. And I was always included in the activities, and I think that my life is richer because of that and the experiences that I was permitted to have.
Absolutely, Marty. You think now the desire, I guess, in your part is to more or less model your life around Marge Holliday, to make sure you serve that same role.
I strive to reach the service level to my students and to teachers that I work with that she provided to me. She was a very, very fine, or is a very, very fine Christian lady. She played the organ at First Baptist in Kingstree for 50 years before retiring, and still loves music today. And she also instilled and was one of the people that inspired my interest in keyboard instruments and learning to play. So I have followed in her footsteps, and I have served as a church organist for the past 20 years in my local church since I was a teenager.
There in Lake City?
There in Lake City. I played for Floyd Chapel for many, many years. I now play for an independent church called Cornerstone Assembly. And absolutely love that part of my life. I have a passion for the music that I play on Sunday, but I also have a passion for the work that I do during the week. And I'm happy that those two passions are separated.
Oh, yeah.
And I'm happy that I am able to share both of them.
You know, as we think about, obviously, the Coastal Regional Outreach Center here in Conway has some great benefits. I'm so glad you shared that. But the experiences here, I think I saw there is a orientation and mobility training, which goes on here much like many of the other outreach centers throughout the state. What is this, Marty, and how could that potentially have an impact on our viewership?
Orientation and mobility is just what it sounds like. Orientation, the ability to orient oneself to one's environment. You do that visually. When you walk in the office, you can immediately scan and you see where everything is, where all the furniture is located, where the offices are, the labels on the doors. That is orientation. I have to orient myself differently. I'm going to have to get a spatial feel for what is available in that office. And then mobility, the ability to move about one's environment freely, independently, and safely. Those are skills that sighted people learn vicariously from the adults around them and from the others. For blind people, they are skills that must be taught. And we have an orientation and mobility therapist that serves this area and provides that service to the students in the schools in the Conway area.
That's invaluable. And of course,
it's invaluable, absolutely.
you think about how you'd go about actually providing some training in that regard. It must be, it could potentially be very difficult.
It can be, because the students are out on the streets, so you see this adult walking along behind or beside the student who is using a cane. The student may be almost of any age, and people really don't understand what's happening, that it is a lesson. And so you get people walking up saying, "Can I help you?" You get people walking up and saying, "Do you, is that necessary to do it that way? Can't we just take that student where they want to go?" We've even had people call the police because they just did not understand what was happening and that it was part of a lesson. The other thing about orientation and mobility is we often write our IEPs, individualized education plans, and we want a percentage of accuracy that's 80%. Well, when you write orientation and mobility goals and objectives, you want 100% proficiency, because that 20% margin of error, if you allow for that, a student could become a grease spot on one of the roads. You know, and you can't have that. There are areas of all our lives that we can be less than perfect, and we will survive, and it will not impact us greatly. But there are areas in all our lives where we have to be perfect. Otherwise, we're going to encounter harm or danger because of it.
I think I saw in talking a little bit to Dorothy Bamback earlier this morning, is there a depository, a book depository, not to shift roles entirely real quick, but up in Spartanburg at the main center, am I correct? There's a special book depository up there?
There is. The South Carolina Instructional Resource Center is located on the campus of SCSDB, and that is a collaborative effort between the South Carolina Department of Education and SCSDB. And that is one of the most exciting things that Dr. Breitweiser and Susan Durant at the Department of Education have done. It is exciting because we now have one place where all Braille and large print textbooks are housed in the state. There is a coordinator there for that, the IRC coordinator, Mrs. Jill Ischinger, and she came to us as a certified teacher of the visually impaired, so she understands the whole process and the importance of getting those materials out. One of the issues that we've encountered for years is students having the texts that they need on the first day of school, when school begins, just like all their sighted peers. And students have a right to expect those texts to be present. It has been very difficult because we often have to order them, we have to have them produced, and then there are just other issues. We are so proud of the fact that last year, on the first day of school, 95.2% of all blind students in South Carolina had the books and materials they needed the first day of school.
Wow.
That is an unprecedented statistic in this state.
That is tremendous. I wonder what other states are like in percentages like that. Must be nothing near that.
Many of them are not. There are some that do have resource centers or instructional material centers. They will call them different things from state to state. And they do a good job. States that have a resource center like the one that we have in Spartanburg do a much better job of providing materials in a timely fashion than states who go about it in a piecemeal or haphazard way.
Marty, we just got a couple of minutes, and obviously, you know, that aspect, not only are you working with the South Carolina Department of Education, but you're also, I think there's a vision partnership that you've been really involved with.
That is another exciting thing that I really feel like Dr. Breitweiser has been the leader in that arena. She is such a tremendous leader in the vision profession. But there is a vision partnership, and it contains 7 stakeholders, and they work collaboratively to provide instruction, teacher preparation, and simply cohesion in the area of vision to make sure that students get what they need and that professionals serving those students are connected with each other.
That's wonderful. That's wonderful. Marty, you know, if a viewer was interested in learning more about the outreach services provided by the Coastal Regional Outreach Center, what's the best way for someone to learn more, to call in, or if there was a place to go online?
Well, the best place to go online would be our website, which is www.scsdb.k12.sc.us, or they could call the Coastal Regional Outreach Center here, where Dr. Bambach is, and I believe that number
That's
is
843-248, I think 8100.
That is correct.
Okay.
That is the number.
Of course, it's a great opportunity for you, Marty. What do you think's been the biggest inspiration for you over the last? I think hearing you talk about Margie Holliday sounded like such a great inspiration for all of us. You know, as you think back on your childhood and you fast forward to the present, what do you think's been the biggest inspiration for you?
I think the biggest inspiration for me is when I look at a student and the student is getting services, but there's no big plan in mind, and I'm able to say to an M team or to parents or whatever, okay, this is where we are, this is where we need to be. Every little academic grade between here and here will not matter in the long run. In other words, academic grades are important, but they're not everything. The skills on how students get those are the most important thing. If they have the skills, they can be successful. And the inspiring part is to watch a student who is struggling become an independent, successful student in the educational arena without needing assistance from others.
Those are great words. Thanks so much for being with us this morning, Marty.
Thank you. I've enjoyed this very, very much.
Absolutely. Stay tuned to more Carolina People with Marty McKenzie coming up next. It's names like Margie Holliday or Louis Braille or even now Marty McKenzie that continue to make a difference in the lives of those visually impaired. Give them a call at 843-248-8100 to learn more.